Alright, so finally for this chapter on cognition, I'm going to talk about problem solving and creativity. The first two terms I'm going to talk about are divergent thinking and convergent thinking. Divergent thinking is pretty much your brain's ability to come up with as many correct answers as possible to a certain problem. For example, coming up with the idea like, what are all the uses for a brick? Someone who lacks much good divergent thinking might just say, oh, it's good for building houses and not much else, whereas someone who's gifted with divergent thinking might say, oh, you can use it as a weapon, you can use it as all these sorts of things. They can come up with a lot of uses for it. That would be an example of a good divergent thinker, someone who comes up with a lot of different options, whereas convergent thinking is just the opposite of that. That's thinking that needs to narrow in on one kind of specific correct answer, I guess. Heuristics, those are rules of thumbs to solve problems. The availability heuristic, a good example for that is how everyone thinks airplanes and air travel is so dangerous, when they're actually less dangerous than cars for vehicle accidents. And that's because using the availability heuristic, we think of, say, a plane crash that we saw on TV, which was obviously very dramatic, while we're still ignoring all the auto accidents that go on, more or less. And so by using the availability heuristic, you're using information that was at least at one point readily available to you, and you look back towards that, so it might not always be very accurate. The representativeness heuristic is basically just stereotyping or generalizing. Say you think that athletes are less intelligent, so that you're thinking of one specific athlete, so you're using that as a representative of all athletes. That would be, the representativeness heuristic can be useful, but not always. Algorithms, as opposed to heuristics, are specific, like detailed steps to solve a problem. That's more like computers, when they use a certain process, a certain step to reach a solution. Insight is basically the sudden understanding of a problem or a potential strategy for solving a problem that usually involves conceptualizing the problem in a new way, rather than if you were just in that just looking at it in a new way. So Wolfgang Kohler, I'm probably saying his name wrong, he did a study where he, I guess, had some chimps in a cage, and they were trying to reach some bananas, and the chimps had some sticks, two separate sticks, and they were trying to use them to get the bananas, and eventually they came up with insight to connect the two sticks together so it could get longer and reach the bananas. And so that's pretty much just a sudden way to solve a problem that works really well and is usually novel. And again, it is more likely to occur when you kind of step back and look at the situation. Functional fixedness, this is a vocabulary term that's always on the AP test, it seems. That, say, if you're in a rainstorm and you don't have an umbrella, but you have a newspaper with you, and you're thinking, man, I wish I had an umbrella, when you don't even realize that you could, in fact, use the newspaper as an umbrella of sorts by just holding it above you. You're fixed on what the normal, I guess, use of the object should be. So that's functional fixedness. Confirmation bias, that's just our brain's kind of tendency to prove hypotheses, our own hypotheses. So we kind of selectively ignore information that wouldn't go against, that goes against what we think. So that can also be dangerous. Hindsight bias is kind of self-explanatory. That's just a kind of bias where you look in the past and you say, oh, hey, I could have known that, or oh, that was so easy, why didn't he do that? So that's pretty much what that is, the bias of just, kind of hindsight 2020 sort of thing. Belief perseverance, that is pretty much just when you have a belief that is just persevering no matter what, despite having evidence to the contrary, and that's obviously something most of us see in everyday life with certain people, and yeah.